Hello, friends, and welcome to A Little Room for Healing, where we talk a little bit about healing, then we do a little healing, and then we talk a little bit more. I am Joel, your host, and today I am in Narberth, Pennsylvania, and my guest is a new friend. Her name is Brenna Carswell, and she is the executive director of Collective Prana and also a former counselor. Welcome.
Thank you.
It's great to have you and to meet you in person.
Same. Feel the same way. Yeah.
We're going to do check-ins first, as usual,
yeah.
And I am going to go first.
Please.
Thank you. Let's see. Oh, I am a little scatterbrained today because I have been in the midst of a months-long journey that has been dysregulating my nervous system, and it's like really I'm at the point where my body just wants to sleep because it's overworked. It's been hypervigilant for so long. It's been hyper alert. It's been on guard. It's been in survival mode, and I'm just a little out of it, and that energy is subtly underneath everything in my system right now, although I'm feeling much more calm and centered, and being with you, I feel more calm and centered. I don't like that you're not bringing up any of those feelings.
Good.
And other than that, I am looking forward to our conversation. I've only talked to you once before, on the phone last week.
Yeah.
And we dropped right into a really great conversation. So
yeah,
I'm
right
looking
away.
forward to seeing what happens between us
yeah.
now. And this is the first time that I've met you in person. So how fun.
Yeah.
That is my check-in. How about you?
I love that. It is so great to have this moment in person because as great as our conversation was on the phone, you have a totally different energy when you're face to face with the person that you've only heard their voice. And so I know things are chaotic for you internally, but there's also this great energy vibe between us right now, which is really comforting. I also had a very stressful morning, so I'm feeling a little scatterbrained, but then also feeling a little more grounded now that I'm here with you. So I'm excited for this conversation. It's always exciting to talk to people of like mind, like spirit, that energy of self-awareness mixed with being open to possibility.
Sweet.
Yeah. So that's how I'm feeling. Very open to possibility.
Fantastic. Ooh, good.
So I was wondering though, as you were talking, where you were touching your stomach while you were talking about where the energy is being felt. Do you feel where your parasympathetic nervous system is at this time? Are you feeling that in your gut, or are you feeling it in your shoulders? Like, do you feel these things physically?
100% physically, yes. Where I feel it right now, I just feel an exhaustion and a pressure in my head. But normally I feel it in my chest and stomach. And my stomach is probably where the epicenter is, because I wake up in the middle of the night with stomach problems and acid reflux, and it's been acting up a lot lately.
Yeah.
Because of this.
Yeah, and it's going to go to the weakest part of your body, right? The thing that struggles the most whenever you're ill or whenever you're in that state of conflict. It's gonna hit there the hardest.
Yeah. And it's like it feels so connected to my power. Wow, it just blanked me again.
Like solar plexus.
Solar plexus, thank you. I was like, sacral was coming up, but like, it's actually attached to that too.
Yep.
But so like that whole is like right in between there is
totally connected, right?
Yeah, it's like that the
Right?
whole like connection point.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because I've worked with so many people with trauma, and my background is very much trauma recovery. And it really wasn't until I was close to 40 that I started realizing how connected the mind and the body are, and had always been for me. And I had been pushing that away. But that I was always feeling warning signs and ignoring them, but I felt them in my body, and I could identify exactly where I was feeling them. And it usually was gastro related too. I was always having issues either with IBS or with, just regular digestion, constantly trying to change my diet to see what would make it work. I tried every diet under the sun, was vegan for a little while, vegetarian, meat, like you name it, just trying to get to the bottom of why I was having all these gastro issues. And it turned out that I just wasn't connecting my mind and body. And so there was an imbalance there. And then once I started doing a little bit more practice of mindfulness, meditation, also the act of moving my body while I'm thinking through something difficult. There's so much right now, so much research coming out about how movement and thought go hand in hand in healing. And I'm so fascinated by it because that's actually what the turning point for me was. I don't have very many digestion issues anymore. I when I see them coming on, I know right away. That's my cue, right? What's going on in your mind? Have you done anything physically to connect your mind and your body? Are you feeling in your body? It's made a big difference.
What does I'm so into this moving while you're thinking through things.
Yeah.
What does the moving do? I see how it connects you, brings you into your body, but
right.
is there something more than that actually is working?
Yeah, so two parts of your brain are firing at the same time, but they're parts of your brain that work in tandem. So that is literally the signal that's telling your body, focus on me. And while you're focusing on me, the focus on me is the movement, right? Putting one foot in front of the other, doing the yoga cue, whatever that movement is for you. Your mind is distracted enough to open up your subconscious. And by opening up your subconscious, you're automatically working through whatever was causing the disruption.
That's why one of the suggestions, if you're in writer's block, is to go for a walk.
Yeah.
You go for a walk, and then it's getting worked out in your subconscious.
That's exactly it.
That's an amazing connection, and just that makes it land really solidly in my body.
Yeah. And I think that it's so easy for all of us to do, and that we do it often without even thinking of it, but we're not connecting that there's actually a positive benefit to it. That if we did it more often, or in a state of conflict, or when we are feeling tension within ourselves or among other people, it will have that effect. It doesn't have to just be recreational. You can use it medicinally for yourself. Once I learned that,
that's cool.
It's been, so that's another thing that got me into hypnotherapy. And what pushed me to get certified in hypnotherapy.
Wow, you do hypnotherapy.
Yeah. Because I had this totally bonkers experience, right? Like, I love that word bonkers for this too, so because it was just like, I was such a skeptic that, I'll say I was a skeptic of hypnotherapy, of anything in the subconscious. I thought that was all woo-woo talk. Anything inner child, anytime I heard inner child, I was like, oh, this nonsense, right? And then I had this bonkers experience actually doing self-hypnotherapy. I didn't realize that's what I was doing, though. I thought I was just meditating. I was doing a meditative practice. And afterward, I had unlocked some weight, trauma weight that I had been carrying around, my whole life, dating back to childhood. Had been in and out of therapy for 25 years, still couldn't get to the root of it. And then in this one session, boom, it unlocked everything and I released it. And I never thought about that stuff. I didn't think about it again until I intentionally thought about it, which is pretty weird for me because this was something I'd been carrying around every single day of my life for 30 something years.
Yeah.
And that one session, so I got curious and I was like, all right, what is this all about? And then I started realizing hypnotherapy is nothing like I thought it was. The watch, the pocket watch, and like the what did they do? Like the black and white squiggle thing on the screen. You're getting, follow my voice.
I don't know that technique.
It's like the old 1950s,
Wow.
versions of hypnotherapy. It's like, that's all poppycock. It's not real at all, right? We actually are in hypnotic states multiple times throughout the day. If you're not in a fight, flight, freeze or fawn mode, if you're not in a panic mode, you're able to go into a hypnotic state, driving a car, watching television. It's any moment where you are able to completely relax and allow whatever's happening in the present moment to happen without trying to control it.
Oh, interesting. Because I do that often, but I've always associated it with dissociation. Is there a fine line between the two? Or
there is, yeah.
Are they somewhat linked?
I think are you intentionally dissociating to avoid, or are you dissociating to be open and accept? And I think a lot of dissociating, the reason that it's sort of gotten this negative connotation is because dissociating has really been an escape method for people, right? And myself included. I would just completely shut down and go into another world. But it wasn't because I was choosing that. It wasn't because I was trying to work through anything. It was because I was avoiding. And whenever you're in an avoidant state, you're not in a receptive state.
Right.
So you're not going to be open to whatever's supposed to be coming in.
And this makes me feel so much better about myself.
Yeah, good. It should.
Because I do often go into these states and I'm actually thinking about, I'm like, things are happening and I'm thinking about things, I'm receiving messages.
Yeah.
And then
There's
I like come out of it and
you.
I'm like, I come out of it and I'm like, oh man, I just left again. What's going on with me?
Right. You're really just
Interesting.
going into your subconscious. Another way that I describe it is, sometimes when you're driving on a highway and you've gotten from point A to point B, but you don't remember anything in between.
That never happens to me because I'm really, I pay a lot of attention when I'm driving.
Yeah.
Just kidding.
You're better than me.
That happens a lot.
Yeah. On those highways, it just, especially when there's nothing going on, there's like stretches that I've driven in New Jersey and Virginia where I, like, the moment that I remembered that this was, the same thing as hypnosis, it took me right back to those drives where I was on the highway and it almost induced panic because I couldn't remember how I got to where I was. But it's because my brain was in a relaxed state, still aware of what was going on around me. If someone had cut me off, I would have come out of it very quickly. Your receptors are still alive and active.
Yeah.
But you're in such a relaxed state that your brain can, your conscious brain can shut off. And that's the part of the brain that is responsible for all of our parasympathetic responses. So if we can shut off the conscious brain more and let the subconscious brain take over, we can work out a lot of our stuff, a lot of our issues. It's when we try to rationalize things too much that we're living too much in the conscious brain and the conscious brain can't hold it.
This is why I get so many downloads about things I'm going through when I'm in the hypnagogic state.
Yeah, that's exactly
It's the
why.
same. It's like, it's almost basically the same thing.
Same thing. Yep.
Amazing. I love that part. I set intentions before I go to sleep.
Yeah.
And then I have my dreams, whatever. And then in the like in the waking state, that's when all the things go. I'm like, holy sh.
That's the best time for self-hypnosis. And self-hypnosis is really just being in a meditative state and just allowing whatever connections are going to come. The best thing to do, you probably do this by setting the intention too, but journaling right before bed or right when you wake up, after you've had that moment to just kind of like in that dreamy state, you know, let whatever thoughts are coming in to come in and not try to control them, right? And then you journal, you'll actually start noticing that there's patterns that your subconscious made that you weren't intending, but those downloads are coming through because you were in that state. You allowed your brain to just relax enough to tell you what it needed.
I've long desired to be able to do that.
Yeah.
I have a block with writing freehand in a journal. I mean, I okay, take that back. I'm putting too much on freehand writing. I have a block with writing. right when I wake up and about like journaling stuff.
Oh, okay. Yeah, and I don't think any one modality is required over another. I think everybody's individual, and that's the best part about doing this kind of work. I think any kind of healing work, any kind of brain work, right? Anything where you're rewiring thoughts, rewiring behaviors, it's going to be personal. You can't do the same thing with one person that you did with another. You can apply the same technique, right? So no matter what, if you're in a relaxed state, you're open to what, you know, is coming to you, and you've had a thought maybe before or after, you can control a little bit more where your subconscious goes. You know, if you're thinking about this issue that has caused you so much turmoil internally, and then you go into a hypnagogic state, right? Your subconscious is all automatically pulling up that turmoil, but it might not appear to you as that particular incident. It might pull up an incident when you were a teenager, right? When you were a child. And that's the aha moments. Those are the downloads that come through where you're like, oh my gosh, this is actually not about what I thought it was about at all. This is a pattern. And how do I break that pattern?
Definitely a pattern.
Yeah.
I actually had this one moment one night in the past month where I was extremely triggered by this situation and I could not fall asleep. I was just writhing in bed for hours and hours and hours.
Oh, that's the worst.
Finally at 5 a.m, I was able to I fell asleep because I was like, I need to distract my brain. So I turned on Led Zeppelin really loud.
Nice.
And I passed out within 2 songs. It was amazing.
You had to distract your conscious brain from what was going on.
And then 2 hours later, I woke up. And in the state of waking up, the realization of what was actually happening all came into my system, and my whole body relaxed. It just was like the dysregulation just was gone because I
just gave me
knew
chills.
Everything that was happening. I was like, oh my God, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
And I didn't have to struggle to find out the reason this was happening anymore. At least for that moment. And then it took me much more time, another month, to figure out what was really going on with me personally in this pattern that I found myself in. Right.
Have you been able to relate it to other times, other experiences in life, so you know where
100%.
It's coming from?
100%.
Yeah.
I know like where exactly it comes from. I know how it's played out in my life. In patterns over and over again.
Yeah. So that's I think a lot of us experience that, and especially any of us who experienced childhood with people in our lives who maybe weren't 100% prepared to raise children or to be around children. I think we all have a little bit of those impressions still in our minds that we're carrying throughout our entire lives, right? And it's only until we get to this age when we're self-aware enough and not selfish enough, like in our 20s, like it's all about me, 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 and you, but me, 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 me. But then once you start getting out of your 30s, into your 40s, heading into your 50s, all of a sudden that self-awareness kicks in. And then you're realizing, hey, wait a minute, that thing that I've been thinking my whole life was true was actually not about me at all. It was about my aunt, my parents, my grandmother. You're carrying that, and you're going to therapy, trying to fix yourself. But it wasn't you at all. It was an impression, an imprint that someone else had made on you that you internalized as a child and carried with you.
The moment when you're in therapy, having gone there being like, I have to fix myself, and you're like, I need to fix myself, and then when you realize that, oh, I don't need to fix myself, I just need to care for myself the way that I needed to be cared for. Like that switch, when that light bulb goes off, it is incredible to take that blame off of yourself and be like, oh wait,
I was just a kid.
I just like, and then you really actually can start loving yourself.
Yeah.
That's the moment when you actually turn on the love for yourself, and you're like, and it's not perfect right away. Like you have to like grow it and build it and build that relationship.
It's still a relationship. Yeah.
But that's the moment when it starts. That's really cool.
It's probably the most impactful thing you can do for yourself is to look at these things that have scared you the most, that have become this negative weight that you're carrying through every relationship, every workplace, handing down to your children. And you take that step back and realize, wait a minute, I was just a child, or I was just a teenager. This isn't mine at all. This was actually theirs that they gave to me. I don't need to keep this. Why am I keeping this? I'm actually this other person. This is who I want to be. And I like that person. So, and then taking that person by the hand and saying, okay, let's fill in some blanks here. You've been going your entire life thinking that you're unlovable or that you're not good enough or whatever because of this thing that you've been carrying around, but that thing doesn't exist. And so now if you've taken that away, how can you live more authentically? How can you live with more satisfaction in life and love yourself in that process? It's such a weight that lifts.
It is a weight that lifts. It's still a challenge, but it's a weight that lifts.
It's not easy. And, I was just having this conversation.
I just like to make that clear.
Yeah.
For people to know that it isn't this magic moment and all of a sudden everything's easy. You realize it, and then it's still work and hard to build that trust and relationship.
I was just having this conversation with someone where I said, you have that moment, the weight lifts, the connection is made, you can let go of that thing that you've been carrying around. Doesn't mean it's gone forever. It will creep back in. And especially if the work isn't continued in other areas of your life, because all of the impressions of ourselves that we're carrying around are woven together. So you can pull at that one thread, but there's 1,000 other threads right behind it. And so that could feel daunting. I had to change my mindset to exciting, because once I started seeing that I pulled that thread and the weight came off and it freed me, and I found love for myself that I had never experienced before in 39 years. I was like, whoa, I want to do this again. What else can I do this with? What other negative thought, whatever limiting belief, whatever, pattern I've been developing, I want to tackle it because I want to have this feeling again. And the more you keep doing it, it becomes a habit, and it becomes less scary and more freeing.
I agree.
Not easy.
I agree with you on the more freeing. Well, okay, let me actually say it this way. If you are on a path of a certain wound, it does become less scary.
Yeah.
but the process, it's scary every time you go
Diving
into a
in.
different wound. It is scary.
Opening those things up, what am I going to find?
Mm-hmm.
Having to relive moments. There's a lot of shame that can come up, a lot of pain. And then, you know, I think sometimes what we also aren't prepared for is that we got it wrong. You know, wait a minute, I read that situation wrong this whole time. There's that little bit of like, oh, that what could have been. Mm-hmm. But you can't go down that road too long because, you know, we can read any situation wrong at any moment, and it doesn't mean that it's permanent. You can change it at any time. But that process of going through it when you don't know what you're going to uncover, it's terrifying.
I have been, regarding this situation I'm in, I have been on a journey where I am really engaging with my anger, the anger that is inside of me. And it's been really intense and scary and uncomfortable. And I've dug up all these things in my shadow that I'm like, this must be the thing that caused the anger. This must be why the anger is happening. And the more the situation keeps confounding and evolving, I get deeper and deeper. And then I finally got to the bottom. And I've never stuck with the anger long enough to get through it.
So this was kind of the first time that you
This is the first time I've ever gotten to the other side of the anger.
Wow.
And what I found was a terrified child.
Yes.
Terror. I'm talking like shaking in a corner. No one's going to help me. I'm about to get eaten by a wolf. Terror. Yeah. And realize that the anger I've had has been a protective part of this child.
Well, and I'll also take that a step further and say that your more developed brain developed that anger because the people that were around to protect you weren't around. Where were you?
Quite honestly, they were, that is true. They weren't there. And they were actually, in my experience, and it's even hard to say out loud, publicly, partly the perpetrators. Right.
And what wounding did they bring into, I mean, like, that's kind of the thing that I've had to accept is that some of the perpetrators of my deepest fears, traumas, you know, deepest wounds from childhood were actually people who had the same deep wounds.
Yes, I was actually going to say this a little earlier. Yeah. When I found this, when I hit it, I had to be with the fact that I found it, and then like a day or two later, I was lying in bed, and it occurred to me. I go, "Oh my God, this must be what my dad has felt like his whole life."
Exactly. And
it just was so, and I had compassion for him, and I was like, "Holy shit, this is intense to be with." Yeah. And I've been blessed to meet the people and have the friends and have the community and learn the tools to like dig in and find this.
Right, we're living in that time.
He hasn't,
but he didn't.
And it was big to see.
And did you find yourself grappling with forgiveness in that? Because that's a pretty common thing. Like once you find the compassion.
I haven't gotten there yet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I'm still trying to regulate my system.
Right. And that's, I will say, along with it being difficult going through this whole process, that has been probably the most difficult part of it for me, is that I needed to come to find compassion. So this is a little bit of a tangent, but similar to what you experienced as I was having this bonkers experience last year. I unraveled a couple of really key things. I had a really, really difficult childhood. I had cancer when I was 5. I have a mother with a really severe mental disorder, father with anger issues, and a whole host of other issues. We had a violent household. We had an emotionally difficult household. They did not have the tools. They didn't. They were 21 and 22 when they had me. They were babies. They did not have any preparation in their mind, in their soul. They just weren't ready for what was coming. And a lot of really terrible things happened during my childhood. And I have siblings. I have a bunch of siblings. So really terrible things happened in their childhoods that I, being the oldest, felt very responsible for. All of these things I'd carried with me for decades, and trying to grapple with the anger with myself, but then also shame, but then also feeling hurt and betrayed too. And I couldn't make sense of all these emotions that were happening at the same time because they seemed so contradictory. Like, how can you be ashamed of yourself but also feel like you've been betrayed? And yet those two things exist simultaneously. And so as I started getting through this work and pulling at all these threads, and the anger that you speak of, oh boy, do I relate, because I did not even realize what an angry person I had become. So bitter. I've actually since gone back and apologized to people that I've worked with, my ex-husband, because I didn't even realize how impactful, how much that had already buried itself in me, and how impactful those emotions were on others.
Ooh.
And then I had to go back and face the role that my parents had in all of this. And that compassion came quickly but surprisingly to me, because how can you have compassion for someone who did such harm? And yet when you start, so then I took that through, and I went through in a dreamlike meditative state, reimagining in different sessions my mother's childhood, my father's childhood, imagining what their parents brought down for them, the dysfunction in their households growing up was significant too. And at a time in our past when we didn't have the language or the acceptance that we do now to have these conversations, to dig it open. Back then it was bottle it up, rub some dirt in it, and keep it moving. You don't talk about that. Boys don't cry. Girls, don't air your dirty laundry. That stays at home, right? And that was passed down to us, but that doesn't absolve anybody, but it also doesn't put all the weight and all the blame on it's the circumstance. And when you can look at it that way, it becomes a little bit easier to have compassion, but boy, is it hard to forgive.
Yeah. I've been working towards, before I got, by the way, the thing I just discovered last week.
Oh my gosh, this is recent. Ooh.
Yeah.
Oh, Joel.
I just popped through the anger last week.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. And before that, I was like working so hard and talking with my therapist about letting go of the possibility that my parents will be able to change or shift into what I want them to be.
Yeah.
And it's been so hard to do that. And having gone through all these, I'm like layers and layers and layers, like big things I've been moving just to get down to this bottom. And every time
you think is the bottom.
Exactly. This particular
level
bottom.
Yeah.
Because every time I get to something huge and move it, I think that was the bottom. But no,
there's more.
And every time I'm like, oh, I think I can finally let go of that hope and that desire, and then I don't let go of it,
right.
and then now I'm here in this, and I'm like, oh, when I'm able to regulate myself and I'm able to like help this little kid who feels scared realize that the harm is past and that I have him,
Yeah,
and
you're safe.
I'm lying in my bed alone, no one is around, and I'm terrified, and I'm like, he's terrified, and I'm like, no, you're safe with me now.
Right.
And once I get that going, I have this, now I don't know if it's fully going to be true, but there's a thought in me that's like, oh, when I can do that, I feel like I'll be able to like engage with my parents and not need that from them, not need them to shift and change.
That's exactly it.
I hope that's the case I hope that is where I am with this, but who knows what's underneath that.
Yeah, it's going to take
there's going to be a lot of grief. I think there's going to be a lot of grief underneath this fear once I
lot of grief.
Stabilize it.
Yeah. Letting go of wanting that apology, that acknowledgement, that change was a little easier for me because my parents haven't been in my life for a really long time. Part of that was a choice and part of that wasn't. I've had to let go of a ghost. I've had to let go of the idea that they will come back to my life. These healed people that I always dreamed of having. But then I realized they could be sitting in front of me even right now, having been in my life this entire time. It doesn't mean that they are going to show up as healed people because they need to do the work. But knowing that I've done the work and knowing that I'm here for the kid who was neglected, for the kid who was abandoned, for the kid who was hurt, has taken the responsibility off needing that from my parents. I'm the parent of my child, of my inner child. So I can go back and have a corrective experience anytime I want in a meditative state. And that's what I do. So I've swapped out my parents for people who I've thought would be better parents to me, who would have given me the childhood of my dreams, right? I've swapped my parents with them. I've gone through and reimagined, what if I was my parents' parent? What would that have been like? How would that have changed how they grew up? What tools they came to parenting with? Once you start tricking the subconscious into seeing all these different possibilities, it lets go of the one that it's been harping on. It lets go of the one that says, but I really want them to come back and love me the way I deserve to be loved and acknowledge what they did to me. It just dissipates because your brain is like, but it could have been this way, and it could have been that way, and it could have been that way. And that's okay, because you've still got you.
Sounds like hope.
It is hope.
It is hope. There's been hope for a while. That just sounds really good. I look forward to progressing on that and getting to there.
I'm so excited for you because you've gotten through one of the hardest parts, which is having the desire and the will to actually face it. I think that's the hardest part. Would you say that, I'm trying to think of how to phrase this, but have you ever had an experience where you're working with a client and you can tell that they're not quite open? And do you feel like the entire session just goes in a totally different direction because they're just not there yet? And they're trying to force something to happen that they're just not open enough yet. They're not in the right place for it. And I think sometimes that's a lot of us going into therapy. We want it to be this answer. And so we are closed off to anything else because we want it to be this answer. I want you to validate and I want you to support, and anything else is just not acceptable, right? Well, now you're not really having a pure and authentic therapy experience. You're having a pre-designed experience, right? And that's not going to get you anywhere. You're not going to grow out of that because it's not real. It's not real. But when you have The trash truck is outside.
Amazing.
Great timing.
Let's throw all this trash in there that we're talking about.
The metaphor that we could keep going with this. I guess the thought that I had was, you could have done this a year ago and you wouldn't have been ready. It wouldn't have had the same result.
Yeah.
And so we all come to these moments when we're meant to come to them. There's no room for, am I doing it right? You're doing it when you're doing it.
Exactly. I totally agree with that. And I've been looking at this for over a year, to get where I'm going. Mm-hmm. I've been wanting it. I haven't been fully ready for getting to where I am right now.
Yeah.
Because over the last year, it has been an insanely intense year of healing for me. And I don't know, I've always thought this. I've thought this about healing for so long, even before this last year. But I look at it as, especially with my work with plant medicine, you have a journey and you get something out of it. And then you have another journey and you get something out of it. And you wouldn't have gotten the thing out of the second journey that you got out of it if you didn't do the first journey.
Exactly.
So it's stepping stones, and it's just this path being built for you that you're walking on.
Exactly.
And you need each stepping stone to get to the destination.
Right.
And that is that's just what my whole healing journey has been. But last year, if I looked at starting last year, January, to this year, this moment in February, I can see exactly why I needed to go that particular route to get to where I am.
That's so crazy that our journeys in the last year, as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking, wow, we were both in very similar situations around the same time. And I recently heard somebody say that between 39 and 43, those ages is when the most transformation happens. You're basically reborn spiritually. And I thought that it was hocus pocus, but now I'm really seeing that there's a lot of truth to it, because I think definitely 40 into 41 was big, but this last year for me, as I came into 42, has been some serious triggers and tests and challenges, and so much growth.
Ugh. That's incredible.
Yeah. I'm so curious how we're gonna look back on this moment a year from now. I guess that's where cool. My head was going.
Yeah, I was wondering where you were going.
A year from now, where's the anger gonna be for you? And a year from now,
well, we'll have to do another podcast.
Let's do a follow-up. I love this idea.
So engrossed in this conversation, and it has been quite some time, and it feels, I really want to give you a healing session.
That sounds great.
So if we could shift into that.
Yeah.
We went longer than I usually do.
Ooh, sorry.
It's not your fault. No one's fault.
It was a great conversation.
I was so engrossed in it and loving it that I was like, I don't want to look at the time.
I know.
Because I don't want it to end. Don't look at the time. So let's do the healing session. And is there a particular between Reiki and Laho Chi that you're interested in?
Oh, interesting. I've never tried Laho Chi.
Would you like
Let's try it.
That?
Yeah.
So let's do Laho Chi. And do you want to set any intentions for your session?
I always love setting intentions. Okay. Good. I'm gonna keep it inside.
Keep it to yourself. Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Then let's do it then.
All right.
We'll be right back after Brenna's 13th Octave Laho Chi session.
Woohoo.
And we are back from Brenna's 13th Octave La Ho Chi session. And I am curious about your experience. You sat up from the table and said, wow, that was surreal.
Yeah.
Tell me about that, if you want to.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't know what to expect because I've only done Reiki, and so it was Reiki-like in many ways. When I'm in a really relaxed, open-minded space, sometimes when my eyes are closed, I can see chakra colors come through. And sometimes it's starbursts and sometimes it's floaters. I never know when it's going to happen and when it's not. But when we first started the session, it started almost right away.
Cool.
And it was really cool. And what was interesting was that so we started at my head, and there was a lot of blue, indigo, violet going on, which was really funny to me.
That's funny.
Well, I mean, all the chakras that you're touching and that you're working on were clearly like activated.
Oh, cool.
Which was really cool to me. Because it doesn't normally happen like that. Sometimes it'll be like a solar plexus that comes through, or sometimes. But as you were moving further down, like to my throat and then to my chest, it went blue, went indigo green. So heart started showing up, which was really cool. And the strangest thing happened, and I'm trying to remember. I mean, it was toward the beginning, but I kind of lost track of time at one point. But I started feeling this pull to the right, and then all of a sudden I dropped off to the left. And I don't know if you felt me move, but it almost felt like I moved on the table, because I was like, whoa, where did I just go? And everything from the last few seconds just wiped out of my mind. I don't know what I had been what I had been seeing, what I had been thinking about. It all just wiped. I've never experienced.
Wow.
It was almost like I went, oh, I'm sorry, my dogs are barking.
That's fine. I jumped a little bit when that
I
happened.
know, me too. Me too. I was like, oh, did you have that reaction too? I don't know. Maybe they got some of that too.
I actually, speaking of your dogs, there was a sense that they were feeling it.
Really?
In the space. In the beginning.
They were so quiet. I was really surprised. It wouldn't surprise me. Whenever I'm doing Reiki in the house, something with them just chills out. It's really crazy because the one dog is so hyperactive.
Oh, wow.
Which is funny that she's the one that's sick, but yeah, it's really interesting. She's the one that I have the hardest time calming down. And yet when I'm doing Reiki on anybody in the house, it's just like she'll just sit down.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
that's
really cool.
I love that.
Yeah, me too. Also, they're my Velcro dogs, so they're attached to me, and so I wonder if there's some sort of like kinetic energy or something.
Totally.
Oh, she's sleeping. We can rest.
she's getting into an energy healing session. Oh, okay, we can tune into that too.
We can turn it off for a little bit. But yeah, I noticed that they were quiet, but then I also just noticed that my mind was quiet. Like I literally went offline at points, and that was really cool and necessary. And then when I was coming out of it, my left side, I couldn't really feel my left side. I had to start moving my left foot, because
I saw that.
I felt my right side of my body, but I couldn't feel my left side.
Wow. Which
was really interesting, because when I had that falling feeling, I was falling to the left. So what's also interesting now that I'm thinking of it is that whenever I tend to injure or get sick on the left side of my body more often. I have no idea if that has any connection here, but one of my first yoga teachers explained to me like the masculine side and the feminine side, and the right side's the masculine, like more focused on work and, you know, how we face the world and, you know, our confidence and all that. And then the feminine side, more the nurturing, the listening, the side that's sort of absorbing things. And a few years ago, I had this really awful illness that I was getting really terrible infections, and I would have to go to the emergency room, and a few times I had to have surgery to actually go in and remove the infection.
Wow.
Every one of those 6 infections happened on my left side. So it was really strange, that connection. I can't say the same thing about my right, like I hardly ever injure my right side. I hardly ever but I experienced feeling on my right side this time, which was really, really interesting.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. A very spiritual experience. And I'm not a religious person, but I'm a spiritual person. And there were points when it was almost like I felt a different spirit in my body, like a different energy going on. And it was only for like a fleeting second, but it was long enough for me to go, huh. Caught that. Yeah. Very cool.
Did you by any chance feel the angels of light when we got to that point?
Yeah, so that was another really crazy part, actually, because there was a red color, and then around the red color was like a lighter pulsing. I won't say that it was white light, because it wasn't white, but it had that golden tone to it, and it was almost like a pulsing star. And I just felt something, you know, I can't even describe it, but I just felt something. Yeah, like a presence, maybe. I don't know if it's a presence, though. Just an energy.
Energy can be a presence.
Yeah.
It can also just be an energy.
Right. Right.
Every time I do the angels of light part, I can't help but smile because I feel them
Really?
come in, and they always do something different to whoever it is. And I don't see it clearly, but there's this knowing that happens of what's happening. And when they were leaving this time, right before they left and finished what they did, one of them kissed you on your heart, one of them kissed you on your forehead.
That would make sense, because I was feeling it in my head.
And then they parted ways.
That's so interesting, because there was this moment, and it was right around that time, now that I'm thinking of it, when all of a sudden I felt my head, and I was like, that's weird. I haven't felt it was like something had touched my head, but you weren't touching my head. So I knew that. I was like, oh, that's very strange. He's nowhere near my, you know.
I was touching the top of your head. I wasn't touching
right
any of your face.
But you weren't touching my forehead.
Yeah, right.
You weren't touching my temples, and I was feeling it on my temple and my forehead. So yeah.
Wow, beautiful.
Yeah. Wow, that's so interesting. What were you feeling during that time period, during the whole session? Like, how was the energy for you?
It was wonderful. It took me a minute personally to really drop into it. But I felt the heat in my hands right off the top.
Right away.
When we did the first position, actually is an invitation to bring the Holy Ghost in, actually.
Okay.
To open things up and to like bless the space or whatever. And I was not mentally quite with it all yet.
Yeah.
but I felt how hot my hands were.
Yeah, I felt that too.
Yeah.
It felt really good. Because the longer I was laying there, the colder I was getting. So I realized I could feel the temperature of your hands shift as...
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and there was a point where I could feel where you were by the heat. And it was calming.
Cool, yeah. Oh, man, that heat is calming. Like, anytime I've gotten Reiki...
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right away.
Yeah,
You just
except
feel
for my friend John, who's been on a couple times, who his energy, when he does Reiki, his hands feel to me to be cold, but it's still calming.
But it's still calming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Really interesting. It's the only time it's not warm.
That's so funny. Yeah, my hands run cold often, so I'm always trying to get the energy moving in my own body before I'm doing Reiki, so that I don't have
cold hands. Yeah, I guess his hands aren't like cold. They're just not. They're not like hot. Neutral,
they're not warm. Yeah.
So the rest of the time, I was just really. I felt really tuned into the experience. I don't really pick up on anything from the people on the table when I'm doing Lao Chi. When I do Reiki, I pick up on lots of stuff.
Yeah.
But with Lao Chi, it doesn't happen that way.
You're more calling in rather than pulling out.
Yeah. And so I was once I locked in and I started feeling the energy flowing through me into you, I was just focused and tuned in and feeling that. And there were a couple of times where I got emotional.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I got to your throat, I was there for a little bit, and then I had this rush of emotion shoot through me. I would say most of the time when that happens, it's not mine.
Yeah.
And sometimes it is, and I actually couldn't tell this time.
Oh, interesting.
Which is interesting.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think for me, the throat has always been a tricky one because there are so many times I grew up not feeling like I had a voice, and yet I loved to sing. And so I would sing, but then the rest of the time it was like, sit down, be quiet, stay small. And I still struggle with that these days, where I'm a very interactive person and I always want to communicate back and forth with people. But I still have that tendency to be like, sit down and shut up, Brenna. You know, like you're talking too much, or you're, you know, and those are my shadows that I'm always working through too. But I've had numerous Reiki masters tell me that my throat is blocked, or that there's an energy that is trying to get out. So it's interesting that appeared for you too.
When I hear you say that you used to sing as a kid, like you loved to sing, and then you say, but then I felt like I had no voice and I was small, it just makes so much sense. I related to me, I was like, I loved singing as a kid, and I also felt like I didn't have a voice. Yeah. But that's why I loved singing.
That's why you loved singing.
Because it's like,
chance.
I can do it. I can, like, this is me to let it out and like move whatever is in there. And
yes. I couldn't agree more. I studied opera for a number of years, and I think, and one of the criticisms was always that I needed to project more, and I needed to have more presence and more confidence. One of the things I loved was practicing on my own, especially in the padded studios at school, because I could project, I could let it rip, right? And I loved that feeling. But when I would get in front of someone who had even the littlest bit of authority over me, I just couldn't, like it was trapped in there.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel claustrophobic?
Oh, yeah. it's not as bad as it used to be. It's gotten much better now that I'm aware of, again, it took so long for me to get into my body. So all of these things were happening, and I'm sort of like, yeah, good.
Yeah, good. Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, it took so long for me to connect that the things that I'm feeling are actually messages from my body.
What would you say the message of the claustrophobic feeling in your body was to you?
Trapped.
In what way?
Usually whenever I'm feeling claustrophobic about something, it's because I'm uncomfortable to begin with. So anything on top of that, whether it's, there were times during the pandemic this house felt claustrophobic to me. It's a house. I have nothing but space around me. But I felt claustrophobic. And I think part of that was that we were all experiencing something traumatic and sort of being forced to behave in a way that wasn't natural to us, which is not socializing, not being out in the world. But I think the other part of it was feeling that lack of freedom to really be expressive and to really move through the world, not just in a social way, but myself, like actually move, go outside, walk, go to the grocery store and go up and down the aisles, those things.
You know what, that just took me back to the first half and what you're talking about, of the movement of being able to work through things and process.
Exactly.
Wow. Oh, that's really cool.
Yeah. It was just before the pandemic when I was making those connections with somatic movement, connecting the brain and the body, and why I loved going to yoga so much. And then the pandemic hit, and it restricted so much of my movement. It was, this house is 1,000 square feet. You're not moving very much. There were days that I would go up and down the stairs just to feel myself moving. And that's tough to also get into your mind when your mind is in full conscious state, full panic mode. So I learned a lot at that time. The claustrophobia, I think, lifted once the pandemic lifted, because I had started getting so connected and had been reading so much and studying so much. I was taking so many certification classes and everything about, all of this mind-body connection stuff. I just wanted to dive in once I started making those connections. That I think the claustrophobia kind of lifted naturally because I was understanding what my body needed and what my mind needed in order to give my body what it needed. If that makes sense.
Yeah.
But growing up, I didn't have that. And I spent most of my childhood in a hospital. So my body was not my own for the first 5 years from age 5 to 10, which is the ages that you're going outside and playing with your friends and you're going to school and you're playing on the playground. And, I was in a hospital bed for weeks at a time. So having other people make decisions about my body too. So I've really realized how much of that I've had to reclaim, because for a long time my body didn't feel like my own. It felt like it belonged to the other people that needed to make decisions about it.
Even past that time?
Even past that time. It took I was well into my 30s before I started recognizing that no, my body is my own. You're living in it. I was having those dissociative experiences where I would feel like I was looking at myself from outside, and I couldn't get into it. And that's when my therapist said, I think you need to start noticing what's happening during yoga and how you're connecting with both at the same time. And that changed everything. But I still have those moments where I've really got to remind myself that I'm an autonomous being and I have control over my body still, and that it's not up to other people how I treat my body, how I connect with it. But I'm sort of, in a way, making up for lost time, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
But another reason why I love energy sessions, because it is a chance to literally do nothing but feel your body.
Yeah. I'm on a journey right now. My therapist is really promoting me to take time every day to tune into all my senses, and not necessarily all my senses every day, but pick one a day.
Yeah.
And really feel it and be with it for however long it is, a minute, 30 seconds, 20 minutes.
Right. I think it's genius.
Yeah, it's great. That's what it reminds, like what you were talking about with your therapist. That's what it reminds me of.
Yeah, it reminds me of that too.
I have another question that's been popping up. Were you brought up in a religious household?
My family was Irish Catholic. For the most part, my parents were not tremendously religious people. They went along with what was required by the family. I was pushed to continue Catholicism into confirmation, but I hit confirmation and I was like, I'm out. I just can't.
Oh, good.
I can't do it. Yeah, I know, right? Congratulations,
that just came right out. I was like, I couldn't even hold that in. Good.
I think from a really early age, I recognized that there was something that was inauthentic about the church for me. Personally, I couldn't reconcile how I lived and most of my friends died from cancer. That was a really difficult thing for me to get through. And, you know, people have all these sayings too, you know, when a little kid is sick, you know, and they'll say, you know, God's will, you know, God can't give you anything that you can't handle, and all these things. And then you go and you sit in a pew and you're hearing an old white man, usually, you know, preaching to you about what Jesus did. And it's just like, I can't connect to these messages. This is not for me. But but the culture of my family was very much in the church.
What age is confirmation in?
So about 16.
About 16, okay. The reason that question came up is because when you said that you spent that time from 5 to 10 in the hospital and your body wasn't your own, part of my experience of the church is that my body's not my own in the church. And
right.
I hear you say that about that time period. I'm like, well, what about, like, it's like, oh my God, I wonder if it was compounded upon with church. Yeah. Sounds like it was.
I mean,
possible that
even to this extent, when I would go up to get communion and they would say the body of Christ, I could, like, it was, I would have a visceral reaction. I couldn't say that to anyone in my family. This is the first time I'm actually verbalizing it to anybody, but I would have a response to that because I didn't even feel like I was in my own body and I'm supposed to be taking in somebody else's.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And pledge it, like, as a pledge too, right? So I'm pledging myself to you by taking you in. I know that I was too young to make these connections then, but I know now that there was something saying, you've had too many people having control over your body.
Our bodies are so smart.
They really
know what's going on, and they tell us, and they've always told us.
Yeah.
And I don't even know if it's like, it's so confusing because we're either not given that information on purpose, or the people that are raising us haven't been taught that, so they can't give us that information. Yep. And it's just
generational at that point.
And we have to learn it on our own, that are all these things that are happening, all these pains and fears, and like that's our body like going, I know what's going on. Yeah. I don't have actual words to share you, but I have this feeling.
Right. It's a warning sign. I mean, our bodies are communicating with us 100% of the time. And it's whether or not we're tuned in. And I think that's part of what we're seeing in society now, too, is that we're becoming more aware of these things because we're seeking answers. Why do I feel like this? Why is my brain working like this? I'm feeling trapped, desperate, I need answers. And yet we're in a society that's pushing us to move faster than ever, be more efficient, beat the machine, right? And then also at the same time, now we're in a time where there's a warring divide. I mean, quite literally over women's bodies. But then there's also these other divides of black and whiteness, right? Of just polarization. You're a good mom, you're a bad mom. You do this, you're not good. You do that, you're bad. And yet, it's not. We don't live in a black and white world. There's so much gray, and our bodies recognize the gray. Our bodies don't recognize the black and white. And so we're constantly trying to like go into these boxes that are either black, either white, and our bodies are like, nope, not happening. Like, you've got to feel this. You've got to be in this. Slow down.
I just am sitting with that line. Our bodies recognize the gray. Our bodies don't recognize the black or the whiteness. That's so good.
Yeah.
That was another one of those times where I think I'm saying great and it comes out good. It's so good.
I love that. So good.
So good. It's so good. I'm also, now that we're talking about what our bodies are feeling, and then claustrophobia was brought up, I get claustrophobic as well. And I've had a hunch that it had to do with my upbringing in the church, even if it's like part of it. And then when I hear you say that you feel claustrophobic, and I get also why, because of the hospital.
Sure, but that aside,
yeah,
that religious influence is so pushy that you can't help but feel claustrophobic if you are not 100% on board. And it sounds like you were always the kid that was super aware of everything around him, and that recognized that something was off or that something wasn't quite authentic. And if it wasn't authentic, you weren't going to buy in. But that goes against the church. And that goes against being a child and of parents. The top-down approach. Your parents were learning that from the church too. There's a hierarchy in everything. But you're at the bottom. Think about all that pressure coming down on you. That's claustrophobia.
Wow. Yep. And that state of claustrophobia as a child for so many years, over and over and over again. And my parents were really involved with the church. I lived across the street from the church.
Oh my gosh.
I lived next door to the grade school that I went to. My dad was the principal. My mom was a teacher. My mom was the organist and choir director.
Wow.
So everybody knew who we were, and we had to be
on
perfect,
all
quote
the time.
unquote, like perfect Christian little children.
Yeah.
And the thing that I discovered last week of this intense fear, scared kid.
Yeah.
I knew this already. I already knew it.
But you're connecting the dots.
Yeah.
Your body knew it. And so to some extent your brain knew it, but it couldn't figure out how it all came together, and now it's putting the puzzle pieces together. Yeah. I'm curious, I'm guessing your parents grew up in the church too?
My dad's dad was a pastor.
Mm.
And my mom's parents were very religious. And
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there wasn't much room for them to choose a different path either. Yeah. I would be really interested to hear if your father had other interests, dreams, aspirations, and see how that manifested in you.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah. That was the answer I expected. I'm not shocked.
He did.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Yeah. There's even now I feel, this is what I feel about, especially on this podcast, is actually only on this podcast. If I wasn't talking about them and their experience in the world with a lot of detail, I get closed.
Yeah.
Because I'm still
Protective
of them, because I was trained to be protective of them.
Right.
Because of the church.
Yep.
And our role in the church.
Yep.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah. Another thread coming in.
I just had a really big energy burst in my body. That's what that was. That's what the whoa was.
From making this connection, do you think?
From connecting. It's another thing that I already knew, but saying it out loud on the podcast, I think is what gave room for this thing to energetically move and go back into circulation. That was wow.
Oh, I love that.
Ooh.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah, it's all protection. I protect them so much.
And that's not your job.
It's not my job.
That's not your job. You were parentified in that position, but that's not your job.
Mm.
And you can let that go. And you can go back to younger Joel and tell him you can breathe.
That's going to be helpful during this time of helping him regulate his nervous system and his fear of being you took on more. You were made to take on more than you were responsible for.
Yeah, you were just a kid. Yeah. And it's one of my biggest complaints about the church and about organized religion is that there are inappropriate expectations placed on people that changes their organic authenticity. I mean, it changes who you are as a person. And so you develop into somebody that you weren't naturally meant to be. And if you were to take off all those layers, who would you be underneath that? That's who wants to come out. Now, if you can do that and then add on some organized religion but still maintain that pure, authentic being that you came into this world as, great.
Yeah.
Now you know that you are truly in the church for the right reasons. But if you're following this because that's how you were taught to do it, it's how you were ordained, you're going to have a conflict between your mind and your body for the rest of your life, because your body is always going to know that there's something off here. And your mind is always going to know that there's something off here. And that connection is what will take it.
Remember when we were talking earlier about stepping stones?
Mm-hmm.
One of the challenges I've had of getting to this part of my religious trauma is because of my other trauma that I had that I've worked through actually on a podcast earlier, and my egoic attachment to that trauma.
Yeah.
And I needed to move my egoic attachment to that trauma in order to be in this conversation fully with you right now.
Right.
And be able to see things a little more
right.
clearly. Oh God, really love the way it works. Just, it's mind-blowing every time.
It's like it's designed to work that way, right?
Wow. Go figure. So cool. It's so cool.
It really is.
Man, the time flies.
I know, when we're having fun. Well, we've already made a date that we're going to revisit this conversation in a year, but
yeah,
might be sooner than that if you have more breakthroughs.
It might be. Actually, just like maybe 5 minutes ago while you were talking, and I was listening.
I get it.
But there was a feeling in me, I was like, you know what? Anytime that I come through Narberth and I have time, I would love to sit down and do a podcast with you.
Let's do it.
This has been so lovely.
I feel the same.
Just really enjoy your perspective and your outlook and your ability to speak it. Like,
thank you.
Your voice.
Yeah.
You found it.
I found it.
And it's pretty great.
And if I can, anyone else can too, folks. And this is literally what my nonprofit works on, right? So we teach people how to do this for themselves. We all carry some kind of negative thought and behavior pattern. We just do, because we all have that unique brain that will interpret information differently. What somebody says to us, they don't have any control over how we take it, but it still implants, it still embeds in there. And then, 20, 30 years later, it's fully baked. Mm-hmm. And it's like, hey, wait a minute. I'm not in the relationships I want. I'm not feeling the quality friendships that I thought I'd have at this point in my life. I'm not in the job that I wanted. I don't feel aligned anymore. And it really comes back to those limiting beliefs that were embedded so early on for so many different reasons. And you don't have to have had some horrifically abusive childhood in order for this to happen. I think a lot of people think that trauma means that you were beaten and left to starve, and like these really catastrophic examples of trauma, and those are certainly out there, and they absolutely happen more frequently than we realize. But I like to focus in on the little t traumas, because we have far more of those than we do the big T traumas. There are far more microaggressions that implanted in our minds that are ruling our day-to-day decisions, our how we feel about ourselves, our own worthiness. Going back to an earlier podcast, I really resonated with what she was saying.
Thanks for listening.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure.
Is there a way for people to connect with your nonprofit or support it or get involved? Absolutely. That you'd like to share?
Yeah, so it's collectiveprana.org. Really easy. And the history of the foundation is on there. What we are aiming to do is on there. The different services that we offer are on there, and again, like our goal is to start making it normal for people to heal themselves without needing services covered by insurance, because it's clear that our society is not moving in a direction that's making healthcare and mental wellness affordable. So it's going to start becoming the obligation of the nonprofits and the community work. And we should be doing it ourselves. I started out as a counseling psychologist. I think there is so much value in conventional therapy. I wouldn't be where I am today without it. But there's a different level of self-healing that has to happen alongside conventional therapy, and you got to go deep.
Amen. Agreed. So happy that you're putting that work out into the world and that message.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe your Collective Prana also has an Instagram page too that people can follow.
We do. We are on Instagram at Collective Prana. We're also on Facebook. I'm being told by my teenage daughter that Facebook is not very cool anymore. So I'm also being told that Instagram isn't cool anymore, but I put my foot down at that. I draw the line. Yeah. Instagram will always be cool to me. So you can find us there. Yeah, exactly.
I follow you on it. I follow Collective Prana.
And I follow you too.
So good. This was so much fun.
This was so great. I can't thank you enough for having me.
I can't thank you enough for being on.
I'm excited to do this again. Yeah. Like, when are you coming back? When you come back to Never?
I do not know, but
we'll put it on the calendar.
I feel a pull.
Yeah, good.
To do this again.
Good.
Thank you for sharing so personally, and also for sharing such wonderful insights in healing journeys. And
thank you for being vulnerable with me. I know that can be really difficult for people, especially when you've just met, but I hope you continue on this journey, because you are onto something so profound, and it's going to change you in the best ways.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are you specifically talking about my healing journey?
Well, I think you have a couple of journeys going on here, right? You've got the podcast journey, you've got your healing journey, you've got your therapy journeys, but, they all intertwine. And when you have breakthroughs in one, it automatically is going to inspire breakthroughs in others. So I'm here for it. I'm excited.
Thank you. Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I guess we'll close it for now.
For now.
And we will definitely reopen it in a future date.
Excellent.
So thank you all for listening. And my invitation to you is that you make a little room for healing in your life. And we'll see you next time.